The Craig Ferguson Pants on Fire tour is on sale now. It's a new show, it's new material, but I'm afraid it's still only me, Craig Ferguson, on my own, standing on a stage, telling comedy words. Come and see me. Buy tickets. Bring your loved ones. Or don't come and see me. Don't buy tickets and don't bring your loved ones. I'm not your dad. You come or don't come, but you should at least know it's happening. And it is. The tour kicks off late September and goes through the end of the year and beyond. Tickets are available at thecraigfergusonshow.com/tour. They're available at thecraigfergusonshow.com/tour or at your local outlet in your region. My name is Craig Ferguson. The name of this podcast is Joy. I talk to interesting people about what brings them happiness. Of course, I love every guest I have in the podcast, but today's a little bit different because I actually do love this guest. She's my friend. She's a rock star. And she really is a rock star. Like sometimes when you say to her, oh, you're a rock star, but she's also a rock star. Her name is KT Tunstall and she's gorgeous. Enjoy this. Tomas, who is producing the show at the moment, he's a vampire and he can only come into your house if people forget that about vampires. Yeah. You have to ask them across the threshold.
Absolutely. Invitation necessary.
Right. Okay. So you're in Sausalito?
I'm in Sausalito, California. I can see the Golden Gate Bridge from my little room and the city at a distance, which is wonderful.
Do you know Bonnie Raitt?
Do you know, I don't know her well, but when I first started out, we were playing in Nashville and we were playing in some little dive. It was like a little 500 kind of dive club. And I turned to the right and Bonnie Raitt is sitting side of stage watching the show.
Wow. Because she lives right there in Sausalito.
Does she live here? I didn't realize
she lives right there.
No way. Oh, that's funny because I did a voiceover job this morning in a great local studio called Studio D recording or something. But he was telling me that Bonnie Raitt just made a record there.
Yeah, because the last time I was in Sausalito, I went to a shop. You know, they have shops in Sausalito.
They totally have shops.
They have shops. And in one of the shops, they sell like little things like art.
Yeah.
And, little kind of
all the things
figurines
that you didn't realize you needed.
Yeah, right. And I bumped into Bonnie Raitt. And I know Bonnie because a very good friend of mine, who sadly died since actually, was her guitarist for a long time.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah.
It's all making sense, but yeah, she's one of the greats for sure.
Oh my God, she's fantastic.
Yeah.
I think you two would get along very well. Actually, you got a bit of a Bonnie Raitt vibe yourself.
Listen, she's one of the ones, one of the sets of shoulders that I stand upon for sure.
Yeah, she's like
great
proper
guitarist.
lady rock star. Yeah. A time when women in that area of rock, it wasn't packed with them.
No, and my own brush with that energy from a closer relationship with Suzi Quatro.
I loved Suzi. What was it? Can the Can.
Oh, Can the Can.
And I remember watching that on Top of the Pops when I was a kid.
The really cool thing about Suzi as well was that she did the leather onesie and the kind of mod hair, but she really didn't wear makeup. She didn't really glam up. She was kind of one of the guys. But Suzi was the first ever female rock and roll musician to play an instrument on stage.
Really?
Yeah. And so she'd been plucked out of Detroit, taken over to the UK, Mickey Most, Rack Studios. And
Mickey Most, who was that producer who was kind of like Simon Cowell before Simon Cowell, right?
It's an amazing story. She was in a family band and she actually played drums in her family band with her sisters. And
the Quatros?
What were they called? Oh God, I'd have to Google it. I can't remember.
There would have to be four of them. Were there four of them in the Quatros?
Four sisters or three sisters.
Right.
This record, I think Mickey must gone to America, seen her, and they only wanted Suzi, and her dad didn't tell her. And so for a year, she was sort of carrying on playing in this family group. And then finally she found out that they actually wanted her. She went over and ended up selling 55 million records in Europe and Australia.
Huge rock star. Were you doing gigs with her recently?
So I met her. She was a huge Elvis fan. And I met her about 20 years ago doing like an huge Elvis tribute show in Hyde Park. And she's
I didn't know this. How did I not know about this?
She's such a character. And so I had kind of based my second album cover on her. I've got this, it's called Drastic Fantastic. I've got this big mirrored bass that I'm playing. And it was sort of like, sort of Suzi Quatro homage. Anyway, she saw me after she played and she goes, KT Tunstall. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, Suzi Quatro. And she goes, I'm handing you the baton. And I was like, what fucking baton? What are you talking about? And she basically handed me the invisible baton of female rock, where she said, you're the one that I see doing what I did, and you're the one who's going to carry it on, and we need to do something together. And 10 years later, we wrote a duets record together. 20 years later. 15
that's
years
crazy. You know, I talked on the podcast to a young American musician who is a woman, her family are Scottish.
What's her name?
Bishop Briggs is the name.
Sure, yes. I mean,
right.
Imagine being called Bishop Briggs. It's amazing. Right,
she's not really called Bishop Briggs.
But just
she's named after...
Using it as an artist name is fantastic.
It's very funny, because Bishop Briggs, to those who don't know, is a suburb of Glasgow.
Yeah.
And
I should call myself Trinent.
From Edinburgh.
From Edinburgh.
I'd have to be Cumbernauld.
Mr. Nold.
Call me Cum. I think I would call myself Cum Bernald. Cum Bernald. There you are. That's I don't, because is that your porn name? No, it's my name, Cum Bernald. But
amazing.
She was saying how much of an influence, because I said, Katie, and she said, oh my God, she talks about you the way you talk about Suzi Quatro.
Oh, come on. That's amazing.
Isn't that great?
It's hard to get your head around that,
Yeah.
Just like, I've had a few people say it now, because it's 20 years since the first record. It was the 20th anniversary of me going on Jules Holland last week.
Was that Suddenly I See? Was that the first one?
No, it was Black Horse.
Black Horse was the first one.
Yes, because
that's interesting. I always have them the other way around in my
head.
I know,
because so Black Horse wasn't on my album. I wrote it after the album was recorded. I was still a nobody. We hadn't released the record yet. But I was so fucking bored of these confessional, emotional open mic nights. I hated them. It was just like Phoebe from Friends playing Smelly Cat and crying, It was awful. And I was really adamant to try and get some rhythm into my set. And whilst trying to pursue my own career, I was the kind of guest vocalist in a Jewish drum and bass band called Oy Vavoy. And it was,
that's not true.
It's true. It's the same record label. I'm going to get lost because there's so much fun. There's so many funny stories about it. But the record label who wanted me to sign to them was an underground Asian dance label that had Nitin Sawhney, who's amazing. They had also signed 7 Seconds by So Solid Crew as a one single deal. And they said, look, to get to know us, we have this instrumental band that needs a vocalist and they need to write some singles. And they're a 10-piece Jewish klezmer drum and bass band called Oy Vavoy. And so I joined that band, wrote some singles, went on tour for the first time, which was brilliant. And the sound guy, I was telling him how awful these open mics nights, and the sound guy, Moshik, was like, I've got this loop pedal in my bag. We should set it up at rehearsal and see what we can do with it. And so at the end of rehearsal one day, we set it up. I mean, it sounded crap to start with, but he kind of tweaked it and helped me. I'd never seen anyone like bash the shit out of the guitar. I'd seen them noodle and do like guitar lines,
Right.
vocals. I was like, surely if you hit the guitar, you get a beat. And it sounded like a badminton racket hitting a plastic bin. It just sounded terrible. And Moshe was like, don't worry, we can kind of, play with it. And he got it sounding like a kick drum. And then the scouts for Jools Holland had come to see me rehearsing and just working out how to use this thing. And I was writing Black Horse, and I was like trying to work out if there was some vocals that you could have going all the way through a song. And I was like, I need some lyric. I mean, it's just, I had no idea what it meant. I was like, these are just lyrics that came into my head to just try and get a song going. And they saw me working that out. And I was like, excellent, we've got a song in the bag for album 2. And then I'm on tour with my mate from Orkney, actually, half cousin. I just had a last blast, like go on tour with a friend and just be in a band rather. I was a bit apprehensive about being the bride being the front person and being known.
Yeah.
So it was a bit of a last blast. Went on this tour and then got the phone call about Jools Holland that Nas, the rapper, had pulled out with 24 hours notice. And the scouts asked if I wanted to replace a global hip-hop star.
Crazy.
And I'm like an unknown, unemployed girl from Scotland.
Do people in America know about Jools Holland and how important that is for a British musician? I
mean, people certainly know more about it now that with the advent of YouTube and everything. But Jools Holland was an original member of Squeeze.
Sure, and he presented The Tube.
The Tube
as well.
Was a fantastic music show.
It was a music show on British television, which was
AF. It was off.
It was crazy.
It was mental. It was like Paula Yates on a bed with Michael Hutchence, and they're practically shagging.
Yeah, I know.
It was
Paula
amazing.
Yates and Jools Holland and Muriel Gray.
Yeah, it was brilliant. But Jools then went on to start later with Jools Holland, which has been now running, I think, for 30 years. And the premise
he's a fantastic musician.
Yeah,
he's
amazing.
Great.
And the premise is that you have five or so acts in the round with an audience that are kind of around everybody on the floor, and it's recorded as live, and everybody plays a song each. And Nas the rapper was meant to be there, and he pulled out, and I got the gig. And I turned up.
Was that a real change your life thing? Was that like a real like John? Yeah,
that was like shot out of a human cannon. So I get down to the studio. I've never been on TV. My album isn't out. I've no experience of this world. And it's Anita Baker, Jackson Browne, and The Cure.
Oh my God.
And Embrace were on it as well. And but I'm just down there going, oh my God, this is mental. And I'm thrown out to the middle of the floor. 3, 2, 1, go. And I'm like, just don't fuck it up, because the looper thing, you've got to get it right.
Yeah, once it starts, that's it, right?
That's it. So I'm like, all right, I got the loop going, get going. I can see Anita Baker like clapping. I'm like, Robert Smith is smiling. Like, this is,
that's rare.
It's going good. And then I get, and I know it's gone well. But it was a risky thing to do. But it was my label boss who'd said to me, do that fucking woohoo thing. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, but Shabs was my label boss. I was like, it's not on the record. We didn't have a recording of it. It wasn't on the album. And Other Side of the World was the first single. I was like, shouldn't I play the first single? He's like, no, trust me, play that horse thing. And I was like, all right. And then the next morning, I've won the online poll of the favorite artist on the show.
Wow. Against The Cure?
Against The Cure, Anita Baker, and Jackson Browne. And then on this tour I'm on at the moment, we just played the Troubadour in Hollywood as our first night. I
know, because Megan and I were trying to get out and we couldn't make it work, and I'm sorry.
No,
did it go well?
It was fantastic. We played the show, and there's a little, I don't know if you've done a gig there, but there's a little corridor upstairs that's your dressing room. And after the gig, it was a great gig. I'm getting changed. And an older gentleman comes straight into the dressing room, which is weird. Like usually you've got 10 minutes or so after the show. And then I realize it's clearly a friend of Sean's. And so, all good. And he's got a beard. And anyway, he comes up to me in the dressing room and he goes, Katie, it's Jackson Browne.
Oh my God.
And I'd never met him that night. And I've never met him since. And I told the story on stage. And Jackson Browne's like, I remember that night. It was crazy.
That's great.
It was amazing.
I love when you hear about the kind of collegiate environment that musicians can have. I mean, they seem to, like, proper musicians, particularly I think rock musicians that write. They don't. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that there's a kind of delight in each other's work that I don't see so much maybe with other areas of entertainment.
It's really funny because it's like a kind of high school musical with musicians, where you often, like at festivals or something, where lots of you are there in one place, because we don't actually see each other very often because you're touring all the time. I mean, it's probably the same as a comedian, that you don't really fraternize that often, you know. And
I don't at all.
And then when you see each other, there's this kind of like, you know, are we cool? And then as soon as you know the vibe is good, you can absolutely gush and tell each other how much you love each other.
Does it cross boundaries? I mean, have you met people who are wildly outside your musical purview that you think, I really want to, like, work out with you, I really want to jam with you, I really want to play with you? Like, do you meet, I don't know, yodelers or... Yeah,
I mean, well, what, like Jewish drum and bass bands?
Well, I suppose so, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't even know the...
Yeah, but I think the most impactful one of those was Hall & Oates. So Daryl Hall does this thing called Live from Daryl's House, where he gets bands to, it's a bit like Jules, he gets them to come and jam. And
I think I've seen this.
And we did one, and my head was blown. I was like, in Daryl's place, he had a place in London where we filmed it, and I'm playing a fucking glockenspiel on Out of Touch. Ding, 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 ding. And I'm like duetting with Daryl Hall. And I ended up actually going on the road with Hall & Oates a lot after that. And that was just so like, cool. It was the coolest. It was so magical.
Isn't it the weirdest thing, though, about getting on a show business, that you rub up against people that you idolized when you were young?
I mean, you can't get away with that these days. You can't rub up against them in the same way as we used to in the
90s. People were rubbing up against people in the 90s in a very different way.
In a different way. It was a different time.
No, there's no rubbing now. No. If you rub yourself.
Exactly. Keep it to yourself.
Keep it to yourself, rub yourself, and call yourself Cum Bernald.
But I think the funny thing is, it's like, you're still a fan of these people, you know? And I find when I'm in those environments, you've just got to go, just fucking be cool. Just be cool. Just be cool. Just be normal. They're just musicians, just like you. They're just musicians, you know, and not lose your shit. Because the thing is, if you lose your shit, you miss the opportunity of actually connecting and having a friendship with someone, you know? I remember when it all first kicked off, and I was friends with Scarlett Page, Jimmy Page's daughter from Led Zeppelin. And it was at the Brits, and I was wearing these amazing Vivienne Westwood boots, right, that I'd got for the thing. And I won that year. It was a brilliant year. And she goes, do you want to meet my dad? And I was like, yes, I really want to meet your dad.
Yes, I will meet Jimmy Page.
And I'm sort of trying to be cool and I meet Jimmy Page. He's like, hello, Katie. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, hi, Jimmy. I said, how are you? And he goes, I'm great. He goes, I love your boobs. And I said, and I just went, I love you. And he went, anyway, nice to meet you.
Yeah, bye.
So
do you know that's why I would never let the bookers approach David Bowie to appear on the old late night show.
God, what would you do?
So I was like, I don't know if I can keep it together.
I know. I feel the same way about Bowie. I never met Bowie, and I think I would be a bit the same with Dylan. I just like, I don't know what the hell you'd say, you know?
Well, I know. I mean, to just say, you're great, I think is probably be weird.
But it was brilliant. When I did Jules Holland, I met Robert Smith after the show, and he was actually the first famous person I ever met. I'd never met a famous person.
First one I ever met.
Who?
Robert Smith.
Shut the fuck up. This is crazy.
Kind of, because
Like our first gigs were at the Edinburgh Festival.
Yeah. Robert Smith. There
That
used to be
man.
a show. There used to be a show on TV in Britain called Jukebox Jury.
I remember.
Right. And it was like some people would come on and they would talk about songs. Like there's 4 people and you play a bunch of new singles and people either go thumbs up or thumb down and say whether they like them or not. And for somebody must have cancelled and I got invited on Jukebox Jury and Robert Smith was on Jukebox Jury. But this is before I got sober.
Wow.
So I was kind of like, and I remember it only because the single that we were judging was Unbelievable by EMF, right?
Wow.
Remember, that's how long ago it was, right?
You're so unbelievable.
Yeah. And Robert Smith didn't like it. He was like, nah, I don't think it's going to be a hit. And I was like, no, it's awesome. It's going to be a hit. And I was drunk and all that. And I still kind of feel a little weird about it because I don't think I was very impressive as a character in those years. I don't know if I'm that impressive now, but back then I was drunk a lot, and I argued with Robert Smith about the value of Unbelievable by EMF. However, I was right.
Yes, you were right. And I'm sure a guy like Robert Smith appreciates some honest conviction.
You know what? You're right. He probably
has people fucking just agreeing with him all the time.
Now as I think about it, he probably thinks about me a lot.
All the time. In fact, the new Cure album probably has a song about you on it.
He probably remembers it and think, oh, you remember that drunk Scottish guy on Jukebox Jury? I really liked him. He challenged me intellectually.
So when I met him, it was the end of the show, and they have a nice little after show, and he was still there. And I remember thinking, I've got to go and say hello to him. And so say hello, and I was asking if they'd enjoyed making the new album they made. And I really remember he sounded like a 21-year-old who just started a band. He was just so excited about new music. And he was just a great dude. I loved his energy about talking about what they'd made, and they'd already been around for 20 years or whatever.
Yeah, but I've heard you talk like that too. I've heard a lot of musicians talk like that. When you have new stuff, Well,
that's what you hope. That's what you hope you feel like. But then that kind of dried up. I thought, I want to keep talking to him. So what do you do? Right, I should ask him a question, And I didn't really think about it. I said, what are you up to this weekend? It's like, what have I done? And he goes, oh, well, I'm having lunch with my parents. And I was like, asking something else. I said, what do they think of your hair and your lipstick? I'm like, oh my God, this is a nightmare. And he just smiles and he just goes, I don't usually do that when I go home.
That's very nice.
And he was just the best. And
oh my God, he's an icon. I mean, he's a game changer.
He ended up giving me a quote for my very first press release.
No.
Yeah, he was great. So sweet.
You keep in touch?
No, like we didn't we didn't swap numbers or anything.
I was just going to ask if he had mentioned me at all. since Jukebox Jury in about 1987 or something.
Yeah, I'll pass on a signed postcard of you next time I see him.
Yeah, that's right. Thinking of you.
Do
you sell merch?
Thinking of you, thinking of me.
Thinking of you, thinking of me. Do you sell merch on your tour?
I do sometimes. Historically, it doesn't seem like my crowd are big merch heads.
Cheap?
It's often just been very poor. And the one thing that I found these days that actually has been a complete turnaround is I do little handwritten lyric sheets. And put them in a little, frame, and people love that. So I think my crowd are much more about music than they are about t-shirts.
Well, here's what I have learned about merch.
Please do tell.
It's that if you sell merch on the road, it's all about the design of the shirt.
Yeah, I can't get it right.
No, here's the thing: don't get involved. That's because I think, no, I say, no, do this, do that. And whenever I have an idea for a t-shirt, nobody fucking buys it.
Maybe that's why. I've always had the ideas and it's never worked.
Don't get involved. It's not your area. Yeah. Sadly, Vivienne Westwood is not available. Get somebody nearly as clever as Vivienne Westwood to do, like Tomas. He farms it out. Tomas, my tour manager, farms it out to a merch company. They do great stuff.
I must get the details. I did really want a t-shirt. Do you remember everyone used to wear the Catherine Hamnett t-shirts? Choose life. And,
Frankie say relax.
Exactly.
And hide yourself and stuff.
I wanted her to do a tour shirt that said, I did life in Fife. But she wouldn't do it. She didn't do requests.
Is that where you grew up?
I grew up in Fife,
St Andrews, right?
St Andrews, yeah.
Was that? Yeah, was it? It's quite a posh town, St Andrews. Were you quite posh?
It's definitely like got a spectrum community in St Andrews.
Sure.
But I was academic families because my dad was a physicist. So my mum and dad were English, and they moved up just before. I was going to say I was born, but I was acquired because I was adopted. But yeah,
I know. I think your story is so interesting.
It's quite a journey for sure.
It really is.
But dad was a physics lecturer, and so I found academia was almost a bit like a religion, where really it was sort of very hermetically sealed, and it was all just academic people hanging out with each other. And
for sure, the bitchiest motherfuckers I've ever come across as well is academics. Like they're more competitive than fucking teenage stand-up comedians. They are unbelievable. They've always got a bad word to say about somebody else in academia.
Well, it's why I really respected my dad as well, because he just didn't give a shit about being a professor. All he wanted to do was research. And he was just like, undergraduates are a waste of university money. And he just loved researching. And I remember the one thing that I've really taken to heart that my dad explained to me was one day he was really upset because they weren't getting the funding for experiments. So all my life growing up, Dad would go to work at 8 a.m, come home for lunch, go back to work, come home for dinner, and then take me and my brother to his lab every evening because he had to kind of keep checking these experiments. And like, he used to fucking play games with liquid nitrogen with us. It was bananas, but he was very dedicated to the experimental research that he was doing. He was working in nuclear magnetic resonance a lot, which led to MRI machines and radiology.
Is that why you light up in the dark?
Exactly. That's why I can even always see where I am. Honestly, dodgy stuff. 12 people in his department ended up getting cancer because they were just ignoring radioactive science. But the one thing my dad said to me was that he was trying to get funding, and he said, "Oh my God, they're only giving us 5 years funding. There's almost no point in doing it." And I was like, "That sounds crazy." I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, you've got to fund for 20 years because you're never going to find out the answers to this research in 5 years." And then I thought, so will you know the answers to your research? And he was like, "Probably not." And I was like, wait, what? So you're dedicating your life to researching something that you will probably never know the answer to? And he's like, absolutely. That's
the mark of it. I think there's an old quote which I love, which is a mark of civilization in a man that he will plant a tree that he knows he will never stand in the shade of.
Beautiful. That's exactly it. And it was an amazing mentality.
Yeah.
That you're part of the course of exploration. You're not going to be
a
the
musician?
person. Not at all. Neither of my parents were musical at all. They thought I was born. They were just, the thing was that they got me lessons. They could recognize that I was talented as a young kid. And absolutely to their credit, they got me music teachers and came and saw me performing at the Bayer Theatre, all these plays, And then when I actually left college and said, guess what? I'm going to be a performing artist. They were like, no. They were like, we thought you were going to be a flute teacher, you know?
I know.
And so it was very frightening for them because they didn't even listen to music. They weren't music fans. There was no record collection in my house.
That's very odd.
It
I
was
wonder
odd.
if is it genetic, do you think? Do you
Well,
think
I
it
think
can be
in my
linked here?
case, yes. I think in my case. Yeah, apparently my a biological father who I never met but found out who he was through Long Lost Family, the ITV show.
Right.
Was Irish. I knew he was Irish, but apparently a very, very good singer and a bar owner. So he would just sing for everybody. So yeah.
Wow.
But it's always been innate. It sort of feels like, I mean, I'm sure it's the same with you with comedy and comedic timing, that you just feel like you've been born bilingual.
Yeah, I can. It's something I can do. I know I can do it. I know that if I have to do it, it's interesting because I've watched you perform in very different spaces. I've seen you play in, giant fucking arenas, and I saw you do a gig in a record shop in London where there was 20 of us in the shop or something.
That was brilliant.
But you're exactly this. It's not. It's a different technique because if you're playing in a giant show, but you seem to me, and I know exactly because I know how this feels. There is a kind of an ease and a sense of purpose that comes with the walk out onto the stage. You go, now I'm going to do what I actually know. Everything from now on, I'm going to be all right until this stops.
I mean, I feel that really comes with time. Like I wasn't like that at first. And it's funny because when I watch myself when I'm younger, I'm like, I seem cool. Like I'm not really looking at the audience that much. I'm not saying that much. I'm a total blabbermouth now. And I'm looking, and I know looking at it, I'm like, I'm shy. I'm definitely shy. And I'm compensating by kind of playing it cool. And now that I'm older, I'm just an absolute gobshite. I'll just go on and be, and I'm talking to the crowd like I talk to you. But I wanted to ask you this because I knew we were talking today. Do you remember, or have you ever had a relationship with this idea of the abyss when you're performing? That you can go off the edge of a cliff, that it can fucking go horribly wrong. Like, do you live with that?
I think I might have done it. Yeah.
I think you actually, that was your career.
Yeah, I think you're talking exactly my technique. I know exactly what you're talking about. Let me ask you though, because have you finished describing it? Because
my point being was that I believe I subscribed to that in the early part of my career. And there was a turning point where I realized I think it's a myth. I don't think it exists. And that's when I changed my demeanor. Was like, I actually don't think anything can really go wrong here. I think it's up to you if it goes wrong.
I think that's right. That's what, it's funny, that happened to me in a very definite way. I have it filmed actually. When I was doing late night. Because until late night, I was doing very much the formulaic, the life of an actor and a comedian and a writer, and I would do this, do that. But late night, because I had to do it every night, it was a repetition every night. I had to be a different show every night. I kind of began to get bored.
Right.
And the boredom was interesting.
Dangerous.
Yeah. Well, what I haven't told a lot of people, and this might be the first time I've talked about it publicly, for about 2 years when I was when I did that monologue I did that everyone talks about when Britney Spears had that meltdown, and I happened to be 15 years sober that day, and I was like, it was in 2007.
And by the way, thank you for doing that. It was a really extremely powerful thing to do.
That was the abyss though, because what happened right at that time, I so hated what I was doing. I hated it. I hated pretending that I was doing jokes like, hey, have you guys been watching the playoffs and stuff? I don't watch the fucking play. I don't even really know what a playoff is. And I was pretending to be someone else, and I was bored and I hated it and I was uncomfortable. And then that thing happened with her that weekend, and I felt terrible for her. But it was, and
when I went to work that morning, it was during that period, maybe a couple of months before, and it ended a couple of months after. Everywhere I went, I had my passport in my top pocket. So that, because I thought, tonight's the night they're going to fucking get rid of me. Tonight's the night I'm not going to be able to stand it and just fucking leave and fuck it and go to Bogota or something.
So you were in
whatever
flight
it is.
mode.
All the time.
Wow.
And I think you're right. There comes to a point where you go, you don't have to run to escape the bonds of your own terror. You don't have to fucking run. You know, that you can face it right there and fine, whatever fucking happens, happens.
And I think you realize you're not a visitor to a venue.
Yeah.
The venue is yours.
That's right.
And I said this to the crowd the other night. I said, this is entirely collaborative. Like, this doesn't happen if you're not here, and this doesn't happen if I'm not here. And that's the magic, is that you create this totally unique closed loop circuit with those particular people. And I say it all the time because I think it's really great for people to remember that when you're in a venue watching someone or you're performing, it's the only time in the history of the fucking universe that those specific people will ever be in a room together. It's like it's like a fingerprint. And
you've got to embrace the analog of it.
Exactly. Yeah. And you know, remembering that experience cannot be emulated by technology. It's completely protected from any possible future because
it's fucking magical.
It's magical. And it's to be awed and to be respected. And I think when I realized, and you know, partly why I realized it was fans would wait afterwards to say hi. And so many of them would say, my favorite bit was when you fucked up. I've got emotional saying that, but it's like, I'd be like, what? I've been like practicing for years and trying to get these songs perfect. And it's when you realize that the perfect show is something special that didn't happen last night, you know?
I think that also it is the recognition of the audience is maturity of a performer. And I tell you what, I'm coming to, this is something I've been messing around with very recently. I was on stage a couple of nights ago in Cleveland. Mm-hmm. And you know the Agora Theatre in Cleveland is a big venue. Yes. It's a nice venue. Yes. I like it. And I was on stage and I was kind of mucking around with the audience towards the end of the night. And I said to them, you guys are probably familiar with the Danish Christian existentialist philosopher Søren Kierkegaard. And when he said, and I believe this to be true, only the noble of heart are called to difficulty. And I said, it's a pain in the ass to go out at night. It's a pain in the ass to get a babysitter. It's a pain in the ass to get in the bus or the train or get your car. Parking's a pain in the ass. Getting a ticket is a pain in the ass. The ticket websites are a pain in the ass. Everything's a pain in the ass. Yeah. And I know it's all difficult. I know it's all that. And I know that money is fucking tight for a lot of people too. And the fact that you did all that, you went through all of that fucking niggly bullshit to come here and hang out with me, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Yeah. And then they waited for the joke and I said, I don't have a joke. Yeah. I really mean it. Yeah. And that was a kind of weird moment as well. And I love that. And I like that what you're describing. Yeah. It's true. It's different.
And talking of Squeeze, so Jules, I don't know if there would be a KT Tunstall if it wasn't for Squeeze, right? Because went on Jools Holland, didn't have a recording of that song. So the first 10,000 copies of the record are the audio from Jools Holland.
Stop. Yeah. I had no idea.
And then we had to rush record a version of the song to actually get it out as a single. And we ended up recording it in Chris Difford's studio, who's also from Squeeze. And then fast forward, 18 years, I'm invited to go on tour with Hall & Oates, and it's two openers. It's me and Squeeze. So that's I'm on crazy. First, then Squeeze, then Hall & Oates. And this was the 25th of February, 2020. So it was just before everything shut down. We were playing Madison Square Gardens. And it was, and it's just holy grail. It's like, that is the pilgrimage. And it's not on your bingo card of life that you might ever get to play that place,
Right.
So I was so excited. It was a bit of a cut down time set because of the special venue. So I had 20 minutes opening time. And the other thing that's amazing about that for me particularly is that I'm solo. So like, who the fuck ever gets to play? You'd always have a band playing Madison Square Gardens, but I get to get on stage to 20,000 people who wouldn't come and see me on my own and play a set for them. So I'm just, so excited. And a friend of mine, it's total name drop, is a photographer called Pete Souza, who was Obama's photographer and Reagan's photographer. But I know him through Brandy Carlisle, and he does quite a lot of music photography these days. Anyway, he's in town. So he says he's going to come to the show. And I go on stage and it's just phenomenal, that space. Have you gigged there?
I've never played it.
God, no. It's an amazing space, and it's in the round, so it feels kind of quite intimate.
I've been to stuff there. Yeah.
So I go on stage, I'm there 45 seconds into my song, all my gear craps out.
Jeez.
The lights turn off, it is dead. I have no equipment. My guitar's not working, but for some reason, my mic is still working. And so I'm fucking on stage with my pants down, with a microphone in front of 20,000 people.
Now that I am familiar with.
Like a minute into the first song.
Mm-hmm.
And the guys are kind of running around trying to work out what's happened. And I'm just going, Jesus Christ, and I thought maybe I should sing an a cappella song, but I don't know what would work without the music. And I couldn't get my head around it quick enough. And I'm thinking in my head, all roads have led here, to being on one of the biggest, most famous stages in the world in this situation. And I just felt myself go, fuck it, no abyss. Go. And I just got on the mic and I just went, Madison Square Gardens, if the 15-year-old me could see the 47-year-old me standing on stage at Madison Square Gardens while all of her stuff fucks up, she'd be delighted. And everybody just roared.
That's great.
And gave me a massive standing O. They got the gear working, and I had a phenomenal rest of the set. And
that's an amazing
It was
story.
incredibly memorable. And Chris Difford was standing side of stage watching. And I did a podcast with him recently, and I told that story, and he let me tell it. And he was like, well, I know that happened, Katie, because I was there watching you. And I was like, God, I just blocked everything out, But Pete Souza was behind me on the stage, and he took this picture of me once I got going again. And my hair is just flying in the air and my muscles popping out. And
oh, nice.
And it just felt like the arena, felt like a gladiator in the arena. What happened?
Mm-hmm.
What do you do when it hits the fan? And it was funny. It was another of those moments where I was like, there's no way anything is ever going to be as confronting as that, as everything going wrong at MSG. I've done it. I've done it. I came through the fire.
Yeah, but also what happens is, I think, I don't know if this will happen to you, but it certainly happened to me. When things started to go wrong and I enjoyed it, I started to look for it to go wrong.
I kind of, so, I'm a little guilty of it.
Like when I started in late night, I had, I think, 8 or 10 writers. When the time I had finished, I had 3. Because I was like, you just put some stuff on the thing and we'll work it out.
But that's why it was so brilliant. And that's why I talk to a lot of people over here, and you are just their absolute number one favorite. Like they go back, and the guy who's with me on tour, just watches the reruns all the time because it's a completely different level of engagement.
It's not possible, it's not possible in a company environment. I think that it's when I watch it, and I wonder if a band does the same thing to a personality like you, because you are a consummate musician. I know you, and I've worked with you, and I love you, and I know how you work. But I also know you, and we've played musical instruments together with my young son, and I know that.
Yeah.
But I think and I've said this to you, I think you think like a stand-up. I think you think like, you have that kind of course you can play in a band. Of course you can play with other musicians. You enjoy it. You're good at it. I can fucking run around with actors and, mileage. I can do all that. But really, when you're on your own, that's when it's
and I have to say, like, there's been times where I've thought, God, it would be nice to be in a band, wouldn't it? To sort of not be really just not be the absolute captain of the ship all the time, and for everything to be your decision and all the consequences of that be on you. But I have to be completely honest, I'm fucking very relieved I'm a solo act.
Yeah,
I
think that's easier on everybody, including the musicians that you was working with.
But
not because of unreasonableness, just because
I do like to have control of the stage and of how it goes, and when I'm on stage, I'm very aware of I've got the wand, I've got the conch, and you decide how it goes, and I love being able to go, yeah, we're not going to do that. We're going to do this.
Also, if you even look at the origin of your career from the story you're telling about Jules, doing Jules' show at that time, that's fucking ballsy.
I remember doing it was up in the Highlands somewhere, did a radio show not long after that was aired. And there was an engineer, and he was such a sweet guy, and I can't remember his name, but he goes, "Kitty, I was watching the telly. I was watching what you were doing." And I went, "Oh no, what's she doing? Don't do it, no." And he understood. There was so few people who understood that it could have gone so wrong.
The danger of what was going on, yeah. But that, whatever that is, that when you talk about the abyss and you talk about the danger, like, one of the very first stand-ups I ever did was at a punk festival in the IPA or the ICA or something in London. And I was absolutely harangued and booed off stage by the audience and all that. And when I come off, because I remember Peter Capaldi was there at the time. He was in the band I was in at the time, and he was like, oh dear. I was like, no. I want to do it again. I know. I want to do it again.
And it's like, I also can't really perform that well, not under pressure.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
So if I'm filming something and I know that I can do it again, it won't be as good.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, here's another thing though. Let me ask you this.
I like the stress.
Sometimes people will come backstage after you've done a show and they'll tell you how great the show was and how much they enjoyed it. And it might not be a show that you enjoyed as much. And I've decided, I've learned over the time to shut up about that now and just say thanks very much.
I know there's a real dissonance that can happen between you thinking you've had a great show and they were like, it was nice.
Yeah.
Or you having a terrible time and them just going, oh, it was great. I
had one recently.
Yeah.
I've heard performers talk about that when they're playing in Japan.
It's just, it's crazy because someone said to me, just don't mumble. Don't ramble because they'll clap for 10 seconds and then it's silence. So they go, and then you're just like, oh my God, it's completely silent. And you just start mumbling nonsense. And it happened.
But did you mumble?
Yeah. I was just like, and a lot of Japanese people don't speak English. So a lot of the audience have no idea what you're saying. Do
they understand what you're singing?
I don't think a good.
Because that's just what really matters in music, does it?
And it's another beautiful thing about music when you travel the world and play for people. You take it for granted that you speak English. And there's so many of these countries that you go to, but they have absolutely, they're basically listening to the Cocteau Twins. They have no idea what you're,
Yeah.
you know, and they really, a lot of audience members won't know what the words mean. And you see that the words are emotionally communicating just as powerfully as if they did know what you were saying. It's magic.
You know what? I went to an AA meeting with a friend of mine from America once in Scotland, and she sat next to me in the meeting. And at the end of the meeting, she went, "That was one of the greatest AA meetings I've ever been to in my life. Didn't understand a fucking word, not a fucking word, but somehow it worked." I was like, "Yeah, I get it."
But
There
yeah,
is
that amazing kind of osmosis through performance of not necessarily having to. I mean, it's the same with art, isn't it? With painting or with dance, where there's something just that isn't to do with language at all.
Right.
You know?
It's the thing that I am so jealous of that doesn't exist in stand-up. If they don't speak English, I can't do it.
I don't agree with you though, because I'm fully of the feeling that I think stand-up is king. I think it is the hardest, most impressive art. I just think it's beyond.
I don't see it that way at all. I think musicianship, funnily enough.
Well,
because
let's slap each other's asses. And
that's more of a 90s thing.
But the thing is, but Craig, I could be having any kind of day. I could be feeling like shit, or I could be feeling great. It doesn't matter. I can get on stage and just play the tunes. And with stand-up, there's just a level of vulnerability where it's going to be pretty, I would think, unless you're incredibly good at acting, they're going to see where you're at.
No, it's not like that at all.
Really?
No, it's not like that at all. It doesn't matter what kind of day you've had. It doesn't matter what kind of madness is going on in your life.
You can still just enter.
Well, when you go onto the stage, you start breathing different air, and it's different. It's a different set of rules. Towards the end of my drinking, I was like the last 6 months, my life was in tatters. You know, my relationship was breaking up. I was homeless for all intents and purposes. Wow. And but I was doing a show in the West End of London. I was doing the Rocky Horror show in the West End of London, which is a lot of moving parts and a lot of things and a lot of laughs and a big audience and high pressure. And every night when I heard the dum da dum and it was about to start, I thought, okay, everything's going to be all right for the next 90 minutes. I mean,
it's amazing that you held that shit together. I don't know how you.
Only for then. I think I think that's what it is. What I mean about the stand-up, though. It doesn't. I mean, look at some of the people that do it, and then how terrible their lives are when they're not on a stage. Yeah. I mean, musicians too. The one that always gets me is producers. Yeah. People that do all this difficult kind of work and then can't, balance their own checking account. It's so bizarre to me.
I know. I was going to say about comedy that the place that I always just find genius is the silence in comedy. And just the courage of silence. And the comedians I really like, they're just so comfortable in silence, and they just don't need to speak into the silence. And maybe that's the same with music as well. Maybe it's the space.
I think it's a similar thing. Robin Williams used to always say, Robin always said it's funny you being so Salito, but Robin used to always say that it's jazz. He said stand-up is jazz, and the way he did, and he always thought it was music. I certainly, nearly every stand-up I know, and certainly every stand-up I like, is musical in some way.
Yeah.
They're not, they have a musical connection at some point. They don't just do that.
Well,
Maybe it's different now because young people become stand-up comedians in a way that they used to become musicians.
Yeah, maybe.
Like it's kind of like, to me, stand-up.
It's probably a wiser choice these days.
I mean, I don't know. The thing about for me, becoming a stand-up was like becoming a real estate agent. It was just like, well, fuck it. You know, I mean,
Really?
it'll do. Yeah.
It felt practical.
Yeah, it felt, well, not practical, more just kind of like a second choice position. I would have rather been you. I wanted to be you, but I can't, or didn't, or wouldn't, or didn't have the talent for it, or didn't have the application for it, or it just wasn't there. Yeah. And I ended up doing something else. But I wanted to be a musician, and I think a lot of, and I've seen it with a lot of actors and stand-ups who all really kind of want to be rock stars. And let's be honest, everybody wants to be a rock star, because you don't say to someone as a compliment if they do something really well. You don't say, you say, oh, you're a rock star, thanks, man. You don't say, oh, you're a comedian, thanks, man.
Oh, you're a graphic artist.
You're an absolute actor, thank you.
Oh, you're a voiceover voice.
Yeah, you're a guy that can write really good jingles. Thank you very much. It's not, they don't do that. It's a rock star. Rock star is it.
I was talking about this to someone the other day about this, the very common actor desire to do music.
Yes.
And I really relate to it because I do think it's because they're spending a career being given the words and told how to say them.
Yes.
And so music is absolutely autonomous. You get to do the performance. And the other thing is, if you're in a movie or a TV show, you don't get an audience fucking clapping at the end of every scene.
No,
we get a huge applause every 4 or 5 minutes.
You know what fucking bothers me about musicians is as well is that you can go out and people will wait for the song you wrote 20 years ago. If I do a joke that I wrote 20 years ago, I got a fucking riot in my hands. I can't even do a joke I wrote a year ago.
Yeah,
it's
you
like,
get criticized.
And it's gone.
There's an amazing bit of audio on the Joni Mitchell live album, Miles of Isles, which is a beautiful live album, I think from the Greek Theatre or Hollywood Bowl in LA.
Right.
And she's about to sing Circle Game, I think. And she's a painter, obviously, Joni Mitchell, great, did a lot of her own album covers. But, she's got that great voice and she just goes, I was always really envious of painters. They can be whatever they want. They can either just stay in the attic and not show anybody their stuff, or they can try and sell their work for $1 million, whatever. But, no one ever said to Van Gogh, hey, man, paint Starry Night again.
Yeah.
And it's brilliant. It's brilliant.
Yeah, true story.
Yeah, there's a lot of like obvious benefits to being a musician as a performer, where
you're doing a great job of it.
Instant gratification,
you're fucking great at it though. I like being your friend.
I like being your friend.
I like being your friend, and I like you're not uncomfortable with me being a fan, which I think is a very advanced. I think you're fine with but I am a fan. But that's okay, because you can be a fan and a friend of someone. It's all right. It's all right.
Absolutely. But I think it's a very good moment to share with anyone watching this who might not know that our worlds have smooshed together.
They have.
In a big way.
They have. The musical of a movie that I did 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Saving Grace, which now you've written the songs for the music for the musical.
And lyrics for the musical. And it's really good.
It is really good.
It's really good. I'm so
and I
excited.
think we're going to do it in London next year. I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's all feeling very good.
I think really that's great. And that means you and I will be in London.
Yeah, and it's a long time. Like, we've been working on it for years and years, like maybe 8 years. I know. And these things take a long time. And I really feel like we've fashioned something fantastic.
It's really cool, isn't it? When we did the preview shows.
It was great. What was it like making that film, Saving Grace?
It was fine.
Did you enjoy it?
I loved it. It was a great
Brenda
time.
Blethyn.
Brenda was so fantastic. We laughed the whole time we were making that film in Cornwall.
All right,
and
she's just brilliant.
She and I made up. I think I told you this. We made up a sea shanty.
Oh, I'm sure.
When we were in Cornwall, I can still remember it and I will sing it for you now.
Please
It
do.
is. He's got blonde hair, a black moustache, and a great brown bushy beard. But he's ginger down below, me boys, ginger down below.
So Brenda Blethyn played a really big role in my life. I was able to tell her, actually, when I met her, and it made her cry, was that Secrets and Lies was the movie that made me look for my biological mother.
Oh,
because I just thought I was very close to my mom and I was very close to my dad. But you've always got that question of like,
sure,
I just want to see the other bits that make me, And
Sure.
And I watched Secrets and Lies, which is just such a work of genius. And I just thought that's an absolute shit show, and I feel like I could handle that. And if I could handle that, then I can probably handle whatever is it waiting for me.
Yeah.
And indeed I could. But it was a big inspiration, that movie.
That's kind of nice.
Yeah.
She's great. She's a lovely person, Brenda, and a great actress.
Yeah, she is one of my favorites.
All right, we got to go.
Yeah.
We're done. Yeah, are we seeing you soon? You're coming to our house or what? Or are you going to the East Coast?
You? I'm going to be in London. I'm in London.
Are you seeing Megan in London? Megan's going to London. Are you going to see her then?
All January, February.
Yeah, I think we'll be there.
Because I'm also getting Clueless on stage.
You're getting the musical of Clueless, which you've done the music and lyrics for.
And it's going to be at the Trafalgar Theatre in the West End from the middle of February.
All right, so we'll come and see that. We'll come
it's going to be fun.
That'll be...
It's just an advert for Saving Grace. That's all it is.
Yeah, knock it off. All right. Well, bugger off. And thanks for doing this. And I'll see you.
Love you.
Soon. I love you too.
And
of course, I love everyone in the podcast, but I actually do love you.
I know it's actually fam, proper fam.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's family.
I remember when we first met doing Saving Grace, and we were talking to someone else, and we were obviously bonding on the Scottish thing. And we were talking about bad language. And I was like, people don't understand. And I said, a good way to explain it is Craig here. He's a great cunt. And they're like, well, you can't. No, it's
you can't call someone that.
That's how to explain it. And you just looked at me and you went, I like you.
I like you. That's so funny.
Yeah. There you go.
All right, get out of here. I'll see you in London.
Big love. See you soon. Bye.
All right, love to you. Bye. Bye.